Literature is the study of human communication. It deals, of course, with great writers, from Shakespeare to Cervantes, Jane Austen to James Joyce. And it deals with texts, Greek plays, romantic poems, Gothic novels set in gloomy castles. But it's also about more than that. Literature offers access to vibrant forms of expression and asks us to embrace new ways of thinking about the world. It shows us how to read critically, even asking why we read and write at all. Above all, it explores how we communicate ideas and why. So for a student of literature, all forms of communication are considered texts and can become the focus of critical inquiry. Rap lyrics, the language of advertisements, our favorite films, stories, poems, diaries, letters, even our constantly updated statuses on social media platforms. All are products of the urge to share ideas and experiences. And each offers its own insights into the ways that we, as humans, see the world. So, to study literature is to open a gateway to understanding complex values and preoccupations of individuals, small communities, and even whole societies. It helps us to imagine what it is like to be someone else and to live a better, more exciting, or simply different life in our own minds. Because literature is complex, though, we need to decode it. And at the turn of the 19th century, writers themselves began to experiment with new ways of looking at the written word. Modern literary criticism was born as romantics such as William Wordsworth sought to define poetry. In his preface to Lyrical Ballads, Wordsworth explored the relationship between the poetry and the poet, rather than the reader. He asked what sort of language poets should use, and how their words are interpreted by human minds. 100 years later, criticism had moved beyond the page. New schools of thought emerged that sought to understand the historical and cultural backgrounds from which literature emerged. Contexts began to change as well. Marxist literary critics such as Terry Eagleton argued that literature is not independent of its time and culture, but rather a product of it. Other thinkers focused on identity, looking at the ways in which an author's sense of self is produced by society's dominant ideologies. In Signs Taken for Wonders, the critic Homi K. Bhabha outlined the pervasive influence of colonial concepts in post-colonial texts, while suggesting, paradoxically, that their appropriation by formerly colonized subjects brought with it the power to subvert them. Feminist critics, such as Simone de Beauvoir, who proposed that one is not born, but rather becomes a woman, and Judith Butler have subjected our ideas of gender to fresh scrutiny. Butler's Gender Trouble agrees that identities are not fixed at birth, and sees them as performed responses to culture and society. From the 1960s, fresh generations of critics were turning their attention away from the creators of texts. These post-structuralists looked beyond authorial intent to focus on interpretation. And while Roland Barthes was announcing the death of the author and the birth of the reader, Michel Foucault proposed in his Archaeology of Knowledge that there is no single right reading of a text. For both critics, it was the multiple, often conflicting interpretations the text produced that mattered. Not least because, read in this way, literature questions apparently universal truths, even the idea of truth itself. Literary criticism challenges the ways we think about the world and how it should be ordered. It helps us understand who we are and how we are.